Hello guys, this is new, beautiful Reddit story.
Title: Millennials. What's y'all plan for retirement? So here I am, just another millennial trying to figure out this whole retirement thing. A couple of years ago, I could have sworn I had a game plan. It was a mix of vague optimism, some casual investing, and, of course, the dream of one day having enough passive income to not work a 9 to 5 until I'm 70. But as I sit here in my one-bedroom apartment, trying to figure out whether I can afford rent next month or if I'm going to need to sell my kidney on the black market. Just kidding. Maybe. I'm starting to realize that I, like most of my friends, have no actual idea how retirement works. I've spent the last few weeks casually scrolling through Reddit, reading personal finance subs, and watching YouTube videos that promise you'll be a millionaire in a year if you just follow these 5 simple rules. But nothing has clicked. Sure, I've got a 401k, but at this rate, I'll be working until I'm 85 just to make ends meet. I know I'm not the only one who feels like this. My friends are all in the same boat. So, I'm putting it out there. What's the plan? What are we all doing to prepare for a future where we aren't tied to the grind? Or are we all doomed to be the generation that never truly retires? A bunch of bad ideas, but also some hope. To give you some background, I'm in my mid-30s. I've bounced between freelance jobs and full-time gigs, mostly in tech and marketing. I know I should be doing more with my money, but I've spent a lot of it on student loans, rent that never stops climbing, and the occasional spontaneous trip to Bali because, self-care. Anyway, a few months ago, my best friend Sam started getting into the whole financial independence, retire early, FIRE movement. Sam's been super into budgeting, and now she's obsessed with the idea of retiring in her 40s. And while I love the idea in theory, it feels a little out of reach. Like, yeah, I can skip avocado toast and try to live on ramen, but when I'm already paying $2,000 per month for an apartment that's smaller than my parents' garage, where do I find the extra savings? Sam says I need to cut back on my lifestyle and be more disciplined with my spending. She's got a spreadsheet that tracks every single expense. Every single one. I don't know about you, but the thought of logging every coffee I buy or every overpriced avocado toast makes me want to throw my computer out the window. So yeah, maybe FIRE isn't the route for me. But then again, do I just keep working until I'm dead? The idea of grinding away until I'm old enough for a pension, which, let's face it, isn't even guaranteed anymore, doesn't seem all that great either. The existential crisis. But I'll be honest, when I really think about it, the problem is bigger than just money or saving for retirement. The world we live in is completely different than the one our parents and grandparents grew up in. Like, when was the last time anyone talked about pensions? It seems like no one has them anymore. And don't get me started on Social Security. It feels like an old myth at this point. It's hard to feel hopeful when you know that the system isn't designed to benefit us in the way it did for previous generations. Everyone's talking about how the Social Security Trust Fund is running out. So, by the time I'm ready to retire, if that ever happens, who knows if any of that will be left? And let's talk about real estate. Owning a home is the American dream, right? Except, every time I look at housing prices in my area, I feel like I'm going to throw up. No matter how much I scrimp and save, I can't imagine ever being able to buy a house. I mean, we're talking about 6 figures in student loan debt, sky-high rents, and now inflation on top of that. How do we even begin to save for something that seems so out of reach? I'm sure you're all familiar with the term renting forever. That seems like the most likely scenario for a lot of us. But then, what's the end game? I don't want to be 80 and living in a one-bedroom apartment with a bunch of cats and a pension that barely covers my utilities. A glimmer of hope, maybe. But then I think about the FIRE movement again. I can't just give up on it. Maybe I'm not going to retire by 40, but I could still get on track to retire earlier than 70, right? Some of the things I've read online have opened my eyes to the idea of building wealth through things other than just my job. Investing in stocks, real estate, starting a side hustle, things like that. For instance, I've started putting money into an index fund. It's nothing huge, but it's something. I don't even really know if it's going to work. But hey, they say it's a long-term strategy, so I'll trust the process. I've also been playing around with a few side hustles, nothing too crazy. I've sold some old stuff on eBay and started tutoring online. I know it's not a game changer, but it's something that can bring in some extra cash. Maybe it's not about being super rich, but just building a foundation where I have more options down the road. I also stumbled upon a few Reddit threads about real estate investing. A couple of people have turned rental properties into a steady income stream. And while I'm not in a position to drop hundreds of thousands on properties right now, the idea of passive income sounds so appealing. Maybe one day I could buy a small rental property in a cheaper area and rent it out. Who knows? Small steps, right? The bigger question, is there hope for us? So, here's where I'm stuck. Am I just wasting my time? Should I accept that my generation is likely going to work until the day we die, hoping that a small nest egg and a couple of passive income streams will make things easier? Or is there actually a real chance that millennials can retire in some reasonable comfort before they're in their 70s? I don't want to be pessimistic, but I feel like the deck is stacked against us. Student loans, rising costs of living, and the housing crisis aren't just going to go away. On top of that, we're facing a future where pensions are no longer a given and Social Security might be a pipe dream. So, am I crazy for even entertaining the idea of retiring at some point? Or should I just prepare to be the person who works their entire life and still can't afford to live without constant stress? Maybe I'm just looking for some advice. Are there any other millennials out there who are actually figuring this out? What's your plan? How do you see retirement working for us in this crazy world? Looking forward to hearing some thoughts. Hopefully, I'm not the only one who's feeling totally lost on this one. I'll be honest, I've been having a mini existential crisis for the past few months. As I inch closer to 30, I'm starting to seriously wonder, what's the plan for retirement? I know that sounds like a boomer question, but hear me out. Everyone says we should be planning for the future, but whenever I sit down to think about what that actually means for me as a millennial, I feel like I'm just staring into the abyss. It's overwhelming. Let's break it down, because it seems like most of us have no idea what we're doing. The dream versus the reality. Okay, so first things first, I'm trying to be financially responsible. Like, I opened a 401k at my first job, shout out to free money from the employer, but honestly, I didn't really get it. I contributed a bit, then forgot about it for a few years. I always hear that retirement planning is important, but every time I look at my bank account, the only thing I can think is, there is no way I'll have enough money to retire by 65. My savings are basically non-existent, and I'm still paying off my student loans. Here's the thing. I see these millennials on Reddit talking about FIRE, financial independence, retire early. They're doing all the right things, cutting back on coffee, living with roommates, avoiding expensive avocado toast. But it feels so not me. Like, I get it, I want financial independence too, but I also want to live my life. I don't want to be eating ramen for the next 30 years just to retire early. But when I look around, it seems like the retirement by 40 thing just isn't possible for most of us. Some of these people are doing all this stuff, and they've got the luxury of having their parents' wealth or maybe even a trust fund. I didn't get that. I can barely pay rent on my own, let alone aggressively save and invest like they do. Rising costs and the real estate dream. Let's talk about housing, because that's probably the biggest roadblock for me, and I know for a lot of my friends. Every time I look at real estate prices, I just want to cry. Buying a house is out of reach. The idea of ever owning property seems like some fantasy I've been told about, but won't ever experience. I mean, what's the point of saving for a down payment when housing prices keep rising faster than I can save? Sure, I could move somewhere cheaper, but that would mean giving up on my career here in the city, and I really don't want to do that. The cost of living is high, but the opportunities are better here. So I feel like I'm stuck. Renting is eating up so much of my paycheck, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. How do I save when the bills never stop coming? And don't even get me started on inflation. And then, if I ever have a little extra cash, there's always the temptation to treat myself. I see people on Instagram living their best lives, going on vacations, buying cool things, and I feel like I should be able to enjoy life while I can. I mean, I don't want to be that person who's like, no, I can't go out with you. I'm saving for retirement. But am I just digging myself a hole? Should I be a hermit and put every penny into a Roth IRA? The struggle is real, y'all. Student loans, the millennial burden. And here's the kicker, my student loan debt. It's like the elephant in the room. It's hanging over my head every single day. I don't have a huge amount compared to some people, but it's still a six-figure burden, and it feels like it will never go away. Every time I try to put extra money into savings or investments, my loans whisper, hey, remember us? I know I'm not alone here. I talk to friends who are in the same boat, struggling to balance saving for the future with paying down debt. Some of them have tried refinancing. Others are just throwing every extra dollar they have into paying it off. But honestly, I'm just trying to get through each month without losing my mind. Paying off the loan and trying to save for a future that feels so uncertain feels impossible. And don't even get me started on trying to buy a house while having student loans. I've read so many horror stories on Reddit about millennials in their 30s who are still stuck renting because their debt is holding them back. It's disheartening, honestly. But wait, there's hope? Okay, so before you all think I'm just a huge pessimist, I do try to do something about it. I've started learning about investing. I've got a small amount in index funds, and I've been dipping my toes into the whole side hustle world. I'm not raking in tons of cash from it, but every little bit helps, right? I've been reading up on things like the FIRE movement and trying to figure out if I could realistically pursue it. Maybe not retire in my 40s, but how about 60? If I could build up enough wealth through smart investments and side hustles, I could eventually scale back my work in my 50s, right? I don't know if that's realistic, but I'm trying. I'm also working on automating my savings and investment contributions, which, honestly, has made a huge difference in my peace of mind. Maybe I won't retire with a massive nest egg, but if I can't afford a fancy house, I'd like to at least be able to not worry about money when I'm older. Or at least not worry about it constantly. I just want a little breathing room. So, millennials, what's your plan? I guess this is why I'm posting. I'm really curious about how other millennials are thinking about this. Like, are we all doomed to work forever? Or are there actually ways we can retire with some sense of financial security? I know everyone says start early and be disciplined. But does anyone else feel like they're just spinning their wheels? What are you all doing to save for the future? How are you balancing paying off debt, saving for retirement, and living a life that doesn't feel like a constant grind? I'm genuinely curious to hear what strategies are working for you. Is FIRE a realistic goal, or should I just forget about it and aim for survive till 65 instead? Looking forward to hearing from y'all. Maybe we can help each other out with some tips and tricks for navigating this whole future thing.